Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today we're taking a look at David DeCastro, Pittsburgh Steelers Pro Bowl guard. They just released him and signed Trey Turner to a one-year deal. And now, if you're the Giants, are you considering looking at DeCastro as a potential option? In free agency, he probably will be very, very cheap. And there is a couple concerns with him, but there is a lot to like about him as well if he does make the decision to come back to football. And I'll tell you what, with the Giants' current players at the offensive guard position, they can't have enough depth and enough competition, to really bring the best out of the current players on the roster. And we're going to talk about this, talk about what DeCastro would bring to this team. Before we do so, Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing real good, and before we get into the why or, discuss DeCastro's stats and why he would be a good fit with the Giants, I'll just say my initial take is if he's healthy and he wants to keep playing, the Giants should do it. They should go after him. They should try and sign him. Unfortunately, that's a big question mark. Is he healthy? Does he want to keep playing football? Why did the Steelers cut him? Well, we have some kind of rumors about why the Steelers cut him, and those rumors are kind of indicating that he might be done playing the sport. And then, of course, Giants can't sign him then. No one can. He'll just go off into retirement and enjoy retirement after a really great career in the NFL. DeCastro has been one of the best offensive guards in the NFL throughout the entirety of his career. Really, at his peak, he was the best right guard in the NFL. He has been a phenomenal talent for the entirety of his career, but now at this point he's starting to wear down. His body's starting to wear down, and it's a question of whether or not he wants to continue playing. And this is kind of interesting because I remember, months ago, fans, viewers of this podcast asking Alex and I, who should the Giants sign? Should they go after an offensive guard? Should they try and sign Trey Turner? And we were saying, well, maybe not, but they should definitely keep an eye out once we get closer to training camp and everything like that. That's when they should keep an eye on guys being cut. And now as we're starting to inch closer, we're about a month away from training camp. This is a pretty big cut. This is like a very surprising big cut. This is a big name player who has been released by the Steelers. And this is one that the Giants probably should consider. But of course, like I said, is he healthy? Does he want to keep playing? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but if he does, I'm on board, and I assume Alex is as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is kind of the situation with David DeCastro. He has bone spurs in his ankle. He's had surgery on his ankle multiple times. He's essentially like, I'm totally fine walking away from football, no regrets. And this is exactly what he said. I have to get surgery on my ankle a third time. This is what he said on Thursday. I tried to fix it last year, but the bone spurs kept coming back. It nagged me pretty bad all last year. And, interestingly enough, all of his injury designations on the, I guess when he was out for a few games or out during practice, none of them were ankle. They were like lats or knees or whatever. It was totally irrelevant to his ankle. He went on to say, got to see how the surgery goes, but I'd have no problem calling it a day and moving on with my life. So clearly he's totally ready to retire from football if the surgery doesn't fix this problem considerably. He is 31 years old, so he's not like a really old player by any means. He still could easily have a couple more years of pretty solid play under his belt if he did make a comeback. And I'll tell you what, he's been a Pro Bowler for the last 6 years straight, and he's been a first-team All-Pro Bowler for 2 of those 6 years. He is what some would say an awesome player, a great talent. And last year, despite all these injuries, despite the bone spurs, and all the stuff that happened to him, he didn't allow a single sack, right? The Giants would love to have a guard that didn't allow a single sack last year for probably next to nothing, right? Because he was projected to make $5.5 million this upcoming season. And with him kind of going through surgery now for a third time and being cut by the Steelers, I have to imagine maybe he'll get half of that. Maybe the Giants could sign him to a 1-year, $3 million deal that's like not much guarantees at all, and then have him compete during training camp and see how he is. I mean, the reality is he might not even be able to compete during training camp because of the surgery. Who knows how long that timetable for recovery would be. They might, an alternative option would be this. The Giants roll into the season with their current roster, Zach Fulton, Shane Lemieux, Will Hernandez at the interior positions. And they have Jonathan Harrison at center who might be able to play some guard. They really just don't have that much talent available. They're putting a lot of their chips in on Lemieux and Hernandez, and that could end up backfiring considerably. Trey Turner, now off the board because he's going to Pittsburgh and filling that David DeCastro vacancy. So there's not much available really for the Giants now, except for DeCastro at that high of a level. He is a guy who has tons of experience. He obviously has success. He's a very, very good pass blocker, which is something the Giants need in the interior of their offensive line because of all the weapons that they did add to this unit this past year. He's about an average run blocker, but the pass protection really would open things up for Daniel Jones, because then you could just transition Will Hernandez back to the left side, Anthony. So when you're looking at, let's say, this theoretical scenario where the Giants are like, okay, you know what, Will, we're going to keep you at left guard. We're going to sign DeCastro, which probably would have to be a week 1 or week 2 move, and they'd have to ease him into things, because if this surgery, takes like a couple months to return from, he probably won't even be ready to compete this summer. He'll be just rehabbing and learning the scheme. They'll have to ease him in. Do you think that would be a good move? Even if he doesn't compete, they're easing him back into things. They're letting him kind of like get his sea legs underneath of him with the scheme. And if Shane Lemieux or Will Hernandez struggles for any reason, they can just plug and play him if need be. What do you think about that type of hypothetical?
I mean, there's not really better insurance that you can get than David DeCastro in this hypothetical scenario. David DeCastro being one of the best offensive guards in the NFL over the course of his career. Now, if you're talking about signing him to potentially be a backup that you expect to take over, kind of like you do with a rookie quarterback, I mean, it would work, but the question is, would DeCastro want to do that? And I actually disagree with the money. I'm a little confused here. People think this is going to be cheap, but DeCastro said he's fine with walking away from football, so he's going to need a reason to come back. So I personally think that he's actually going to look for more money than people are expecting. I don't think the $1 to $3 million range that Trey Turner landed in is going to fit David DeCastro. I think David DeCastro, coming off of the surgery, understanding that he's going to sacrifice his body once again, even though he's already had multiple surgeries, just to play another season or so, I think he's going to want some more incentive to play that season. He's going to want a little bit more money. I think we could be talking about closer to $5 to $7 million.
Build a deal that's more incentive laden. Like, you start this many games, you play this many games, you make this much more money. I think that's a reasonable thing to offer him, because like the injury obviously is a concern, and you're like, if you do play this amount of time, you earn this amount of money. But alternatively, if you don't end up playing, if you get injured, if you decide you want to retire mid-season, which is not fair to us, I feel like for the most part it's fair to offer him more of an incentive laden deal than to just give him like guarantees.
And I agree, but I just think since he's mulling retirement, he's going to want something with more guarantees. He's going to want something guaranteed before he commits to playing this season, since he's already saying that he's fine with not playing the season and not playing ever again. So I do think this is going to be a little bit more pricey than most fans think, but I also think to the fact that the Giants might not have a lot of cap space right now, but we are talking about this potentially being a signing that happens in September, not even July, but September. So for the Giants, by September, they should have some cap space cleared. They should make some roster cuts, and you should see a couple players get released that do free up a few $1 million for the Giants that they can bring into the regular season as insurance money, which is what Dave Gettleman calls it, which is what basically signed Logan Ryan last year, which could basically sign David DeCastro this year. This could be their insurance money that they spend here on offensive guard, because I think Alex and I are in agreement. We're not big fans of what the Giants have at offensive guard right now. We're pretty skeptical. 2 giant question marks at both of those starting positions. David DeCastro, while he would be another question mark, I feel like his baseline level of performance is just higher than anyone else on the roster that we have at offensive guard. So I would like this. I have so many question marks about it. It's a very murky situation, and we don't really know what DeCastro wants to do, and we don't really know what the Giants would want to do, when they would want to sign DeCastro, and how much they would want to sign him for.
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I think the incentive deal makes sense, because that way he knows if he plays this amount of time, he gets this amount of money, and it could be a little bit more than he would get if he was just asking for a straight up deal. But the Giants here, like, this is a big question mark, and I think it's fair to talk about. This summer is going to tell us a lot about the guard situation, because look, there's not much depth on the free agent market right now in terms of guard support. With Trey Turner off the board, with David DeCastro not even guaranteed he's going to come back and play football again, there is not a lot to work with at guard in the free agency market. So if the Giants suddenly have an issue where they have an injury at left guard, or at Shane Lemieux gets injured, or Will Hernandez gets injured, they're in a lot of trouble, guys. This is not a team that has a 4-tiered offensive line depth piece at offensive guard. We drafted no offensive linemen this year. Keep that in mind. We have a couple undrafted free agents, but how willing are we to put an offensive free agent, a UDFA rather, from last year or this year as a starter immediately, or like just plug and play starter? I don't think I feel very good about that. I think we have got Jake Burton, who has opened some eyes, but I don't really feel confident that we have enough depth to supplement injuries or deficiencies right now. Are we really investing this much of our chips, this much optimism into two players who have proved absolutely nothing? And now look, I'll be optimistic as well because look, last year, first year in a scheme, no in-person training, no preseason, barely any chemistry with the teammates. They're going to be better this year, right? But injuries happen in the NFL. If they get rolled up on an ankle, are we really trusting Zach Fulton, who allowed the most sacks in the NFL last year, to hold it down for however many games a guy might miss? Or what if he gets injured too? Look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Comes down to it, Super Bowl comes around, both tackles are out, and Patrick Mahomes gets slaughtered. This could end up being a significant issue for the Giants, and I'm very, very worried about that exactly, because I'm not even saying that Shane Lemieux or Will Hernandez are going to suck. I'm just saying, what if injuries happen? That's a very realistic thing to consider. Considering how much Dave Gettleman has poured into the offensive line, how much he's guaranteed this solution, I don't feel good about this line still. And I feel like we might have missed out on drafting somebody. I know we had our eyes on Landon Dickerson. I know we had our eyes on a couple different guys there, here and there. But the ultimate reality is that we're still thin at this spot, and there's not much options on the free agent market unless we're going to be trading guys. Unless we're trading for an offensive lineman. But guards and a good offensive lineman in the NFL, they're not traded very often. It's hard to find good offensive linemen. You know what I mean? So teams aren't looking to trade these guys away unless it's for a lot of capital back. So David DeCastro, I'm for sure, if I'm the Giants, I'm 100% interested in him, 100% thinking about bringing him in if he elects to stick with football after the surgery and if it all goes well. I mean, you just can't not. You just can't not consider a guy who has 6 Pro Bowls to his name, 2 first-team All-Pro Bowls. He's been 6 consecutive Pro Bowl appearances, and he didn't allow a sack last year, and he's probably making less than $5 million. How do you pass that up? How do you not even bat an eye, especially if you desperately need offensive line support? So that's how I feel, guys. Still remaining optimistic that Shane Lemieux and Will Hernandez can be adequate starters. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is we just don't have a lot of depth, so if anything does happen to them, we are in deep, deep shit. That's the only way I can put it. We're in deep shit. So hopefully, Anthony, we climb a little bit here. But how are you optimistic about this group? Like, what are you thinking about Will Hernandez, Shane Lemieux? Are you as worried as I am? But there is reasons for hope as well.
I mean, yeah, I'm extremely worried, particularly with Shane Lemieux. I wasn't impressed by his performance last season. I thought he was decent as a run blocker, but he was just pitiful in pass protection. And it's something that's going to take a lot of work for him to improve on because he was that bad. And I know a lot of Giants fans are high on Shane Lemieux. Personally, I'm not. I'm not one of those Shane Lemieux, big fans. I think he's got the potential there, but he's just young. I don't think he should have been starting last year, 5th-round rookie. I don't think he was ready. I think you're going to need to develop him some more, but unfortunately, he is a starter right now, and he doesn't really have that time to sit behind the scenes and develop. One reason that I am optimistic for this Giants offensive line, though, I did discuss this in an episode of Tony's Takes. Go check that out. That's my solo show on this channel. I discussed that the Giants Joe Judge went ahead and revamped the offensive coaching staff. He made a lot of changes on the offensive coaching staff. Basically, they brought in a new offensive line coach, and I love the hiring of Robert Sale because he is a guy who has 0 NFL experience. What he's used to doing is coaching collegiate football players, young guys. Everybody on the Giants offensive line that's starting or projected to start by the start of the season is in their 2nd or 3rd season. So basically collegiate players, really young guys that Rob Sale is used to coaching. Ben Wilkerson as well is a really young coach. Both of these guys are in their 40s. They're really young NFL coaches, and they're going to be working with the offensive line extensively, Ben Wilkerson being the assistant offensive line coach. And then on top of that, Joe Judge did a couple other things to help with the offensive line. He went ahead and brought in Pat Flaherty. Many of you might remember Pat Flaherty. He was the Giants offensive line coach for both of their Super Bowl runs with Eli Manning. He's been in the NFL for like over 40 years coaching offensive linemen and other positions, but he is an offensive line specialist, and they brought him in as a consultant. That's what Joe Judge hired him as. And basically what he's going to do, kind of just coaching Rob Sale and teaching him how to coach the offensive line and also working with the offensive line and just helping that group develop. So you have one of the most experienced offensive line coaches in the NFL working with the Giants offensive line this year, helping these young coaches work with the offensive line. So I think that's really helpful. And then on top of that, Joe Judge also promoted Freddie Kitchens to the senior offensive assistant role, and his main responsibility will be to work with the offensive line and basically bridge the gap between Rob Sale and Jason Garrett. So there's always a difference between the offensive line coach's way that he coaches the offensive line, and then of course the offensive coordinator has his pass protection schemes, right? That is its own scheme separate from the passing concepts and running scheme. There is a pass protection scheme, and basically what Freddie Kitchens is going to do is help those two connect and collaborate on that, how to get this pass protection scheme to improve, because the Giants offensive linemen last year were frequently confused and misdiagnosing blitzes and weren't sure what the protection was. The protection call was getting confused a little bit too frequently. So basically you're going to bridge that gap with Freddie Kitchens. He's going to work with the line, and then he's also going to work with Jason Garrett to improve the offensive play calling. This was the latest episode of Tony's Takes. That was the whole topic there. Freddie Kitchens, what his promotion means for the Giants. But basically, I think now that you have those four men that I just mentioned all hired just to focus on this offensive line, plus all these young players, I think now you have this collaborative effort, kind of as a dream team squad of offensive line coaches that will help these guys develop. So that's the reason that I'm optimistic about the Giants offensive line. Not because I think there's a ton of talent on it. I think there's a huge lack of talent on it, especially at left guard and right guard, but they've really got a ton of offensive line coaches working with these young players, and they are young players, so you never know. Maybe they will develop into something. They're all like 25 years or younger, so I think with all of these offensive line coaches working with them, I do think that they develop and they will be a better offensive line unit than they were last season. I do see a lot of room for improvement. I think they will improve because of these coaches, and I'm excited to see that happen. So I am optimistic just for different reasons than most people.
All right. Interesting analysis there. Yeah, I have my reasons too, but we're hoping for the best, guys. Hopefully, they consider David DeCastro, because I think you can't have enough quality depth. If they have the money for it, might as well take a shot. Can never have enough competition too, especially high-end competition with 6 Pro Bowls to their name. Worth the chance, and it's probably for a pretty reasonable price, similar to Trey Turner. I don't really know what the Giants' plan are here, but it seems like they're really depending on their coaching staff to handle a majority of the load to try and get these guys into shape, whip them up into shape, and get them active in a quality offensive front for Daniel Jones. And we're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how it progresses. Obviously, training camp is coming up in a couple weeks. We're excited for that. We'll keep eyes on all the offensive line, the combinations that they're running with, and who's getting some reps on first team and second team. So that'll be interesting, my friends. But thank you so much for tuning into Fireside Giants. A quick little video here today, talk about the OL and David DeCastro, what he kind of would fit into this unit and what the price tag might look like for him. But as always, make sure to subscribe below on YouTube, notifications on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.